VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
And welcome to Crosstalk here on VCY America. Just before I introduce our guest today, I just want to point out an interesting news story that came out yesterday from Fox News. Yesterday, on our calendar, October 24th, I opened up my calendar and there's a date that's listed there. It's called United Nations Day, October 24th. And on that day, listen to this, Fox News reporting that the Vatican called Monday for radical reform of the world's financial systems, including the creation of a global political authority to manage the economy. A proposal by the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace calls for a new world economic order based on ethics and the achievement of a universal common good. The proposal acknowledges, however, that a long road still needs to be traveled before arriving at the creation of a public authority with universal jurisdiction, and suggests the reform process begin with the United Nations as a point of reference. Vatican pronouncements on the economy are meant to guide world leaders as well as the global church. Interesting. United Nations Day, we have the Vatican calling for a new world economic order. Well, there's a lot of change that is taking place, not only economically across the world, but also politically as well. And today we're going to be talking about the fruits of the Arab Spring. I mean, we are seeing the world turn upside down in Tunisia, Egypt, Syria, Libya, and on the list is progressing. And here to talk about the fruits of the Arab Spring, what is happening before our very eyes and where things are going, is David Rubin, the former mayor of Shiloh, Israel, in the region of Samaria, known to most of the world as the West Bank. He's a founder and president of the Shiloh Israel Children's Fund. Again, that's a fund that's dedicated to easing the trauma of children who've been victims of terrorist attacks, as well as rebuilding the biblical heartland of Israel. David Rubin is the author of the book, The Islamic Tsunami, Israel and America in the Age of Obama. And David, welcome back here to the program Crosstalk.
Well, thank you. Good to be back with you, Jim.
We are seeing a lot of change that happened over the weekend. We have seen the elections take place here over the weekend, and the Freedom Day take place here by another country. And David, you have a lot to share with us today about what is taking place, especially in Libya. And you are observing the establishment of a new Libya government, and it looks like Shariah is going to be at the top of their list there. Tell us, are you just jumping to conclusions that these rebels are going to bring about Sharia law?
No. This is very clear, and it has been clear for some time that is the direction that it's going in. You recall that all of the billions of dollars that were spent on NATO's attacks on Libya in order to get Gaddafi out of power. But not much thought was put into what is going to happen after, what happens the day after. And there has been a lot of talk in the Libyan transitional government about the day after. They didn't forget about that, and they did think about that. And what has happened is that they have developed a draft constitution which calls for Sharia law, that oppressive Islamic law that makes everyone who is a non-Muslim a second-class citizen, and also women, by the way. And that law is going to be the basis for the new Libya. It was spoken about some time ago in the middle of the fighting, a couple of months ago, and it did get some airplay, but not too much attention, really. And just yesterday, 2 days ago, the head of the transitional committee governing Libya said very clearly and with absolutely no ambivalence that Sharia law will be the basis for the law in Libya, and that any laws that are currently on the books that contradict Sharia law will be nullified as soon as the government comes into power.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I'm looking at a news story here on cnsnews.com, and this transitional government said any law that violates Sharia is null and void legally, implied that Islamic law would not merely be one of several sources of inspiration, but the ultimate one. And evidently there was some talk to do about this, and then yesterday he held a press conference assuring the international community that Libyans were moderate Muslims. Do you buy that?
Well, first of all, I don't buy that expression at all. Mm-hmm. There is no such thing as a moderate Muslim unless he is a lapsed Muslim. Any Muslim who keeps his religion is going to be violent, is going to believe in jihad. It doesn't mean that he will launch violent attacks against innocent civilians, but it does mean that he is going to believe in those attacks on innocent civilians. He is going to believe in the concept of jihad, which means holy war in Arabic, and that concept of holy war, of jihad, calls for violence against the non-believers, meaning those who are not Muslims. And it's very clear, there is absolutely no confusion in the Islamic world about what jihad is. It's understood by them.
Well, what's interesting here now, the State Department here in the U.S., Victoria Nuland representing the State Department, after he gave this clarification yesterday saying, well, we're moderate Muslims, this is when the State Department said, we seek a democracy that meets international human rights standards, that provides a place for all Libyans, and that serves to unify the country. In other words, they're saying as long as they say they're having Sharia in Libya, but as long as universal human rights are respected, we're okay with that. But but
it's an oxymoron.
Exactly.
It's a contradiction in terms.
Mm-hmm.
There cannot be an Islam without a violation of human rights as we understand human rights. The Western understanding of human rights is not the Islamic understanding of human rights. The Islamic understanding of human rights is that women are protected, that they're not allowed to drive cars, that they can't travel out of a country without the husband's permission. The concept of Islamic human rights includes that a church cannot be built in an Islamic country. That is the human rights, because it's human rights of the Muslims. No one cares about in an Islamic society. There is no caring for the other religions in the world. They're not considered to have any validity, and the people are not entitled to their opinions. It's very, very interesting. I'm a Jew, and I live in Israel, and I believe very strongly in the Torah of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Okay, that God gave to the Jewish people. Now, there are many Christian friends that I have in America, and they're very good friends, and I go out speaking in churches, and I have a lot of contact with the Christian world. But we have some differences of opinion in theology. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't mean that because we have those differences of theology that we're going to oppress the other. We believe, and I grew up in America, so this belief is deep within me, not just from books, but also from what I grew up with. And I believe very strongly that if somebody wants to build a place of worship, like a church in Israel, that it should be allowed, and to renovate a church should be allowed, and is allowed, by the way. But in Islamic society, according to Sharia law, it is not allowed to build any place of worship other than a mosque. And there were just these riots in Egypt. Do you know how those riots started? Many people don't. There were 24 Christians who were killed in those riots in Egypt, and there were a couple of hundred who were wounded. But the way it all started was because a rumor was going around, and I know this from my Christian contacts in Egypt. There was a rumor going around that the Christians wanted to build wanted to renovate, to do some serious renovations on a church. And if you build a church in an Islamic society, in a society that's governed by Sharia law, it is illegal. And if you renovate a church in a society that is governed by Sharia law, it is illegal. And you may recall that there was a gentleman in Libya, a Jewish man who used to live in Libya, who went back to Libya to renovate a synagogue in Libya after the revolution. And he was hounded, he was harassed, he was abused, and he was forced to flee for his life from Libya because he wanted to renovate a synagogue in Libya. So this is the game. This is what Sharia is all about.
David, the State Department made one other statement here I'd like you to comment on, and they said this, quote, "I would simply say that the term Sharia has a broad application and is understood differently in different places and by different commentators." Is Sharia, does it have a broad application, or is there a standard to Sharia?
Only if one believes in taqiyya, which in Arabic means deception to further the cause of Islam. And I very often tell a story about Yasser Arafat, who was the head of the Palestine Liberation Organization for many years, and he was the forerunner to Mahmoud Abbas as head of the Palestinian Authority. When Yasser Arafat spoke after the so-called peace process had started, he spoke in a mosque in a Western country, and he spoke in English, and he said, "With blood and fire, we will liberate you, O Jerusalem. Jihad, jihad, jihad." And then after he came out of the mosque, he was surrounded by Western reporters who wanted to know what is this all about. This guy is the leader of a peace process. He's got a Nobel Peace Prize, and here he's calling for holy war, for liberating Jerusalem with blood and fire. And they said, "Mr. Arafat, how can you call for jihad on one hand, and out of the other side of your mouth call for peace?" And he gave that sly smile that he knew how to do so well. And using the art of taqiyya, deception, he said, "I will continue my jihad for peace."
Oh my!
And the reporters were just standing there with their mouths open. They didn't know what to say. But this, to me, is a prime example of taqiyya, of deception. And if anyone says that Islam and Sharia law has broad applications and all this kind of mumbo jumbo, well, that is all just nonsense. The taqiyya law. Taqiyya is part of Sharia law. Lying is legitimate in Islam, and it is dangerous for everyone who is not a Muslim.
And, folks, it's coming right from the U.S. Department of State. We'll be back in 1 minute. You're listening to Crosstalk on the VCY America Network.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, creation researcher and scientist at the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, was there room on Noah's Ark for more people?
Chris, the Bible gives us the gross dimensions of the ark, about 450 feet long and 75 feet wide and 45 feet high. On board would be 2 of every kind of land animal that God created, except 7 of the clean kinds. It can be shown that the ark was probably about 3 times bigger than it had to be to carry all the animals. Thus, there was plenty of room. The Bible tells us that Noah was a preacher of righteousness. The flood was a judgment of sin, and those sinners of his day, had they repented and gotten on board, they would have been saved. But they chose to reject God's plan of salvation and were judged along with the rest of the earth. Chris, you see how even the story of Noah's Ark has a wonderful story to tell us today.
Thanks, Dr. John. Dr. Morris has recorded a special cassette about Noah's flood. It's yours free of charge when you call 1-800-7-GENESIS.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. We're speaking today with David Rubin, the former mayor of Shiloh, Israel. He is the author of the Islamic Tsunami, Israel and America in the Age of Obama. And we're talking about fruits of the Arab Spring. We're talking about recent events over the last 48 hours that have transpired and the implications with these as well. David, didn't we go into Libya for the sake of freedom? To bring freedom to that land?
Well, you're asking what the stated reason was?
Yeah, yes.
Or the real reason?
You tell us the differentiation there.
Well, President Obama said that the demonstrations of the Arab Spring in Egypt will inspire us. And he said that we are fighting for freedom in Libya. Yes, he did say that. Hillary Clinton echoed those sentiments. However, when we went in there, I believe that we were just going in because NATO was very concerned about their oil supply, because they saw that there were problems in Libya, and that there was a potential civil war coming on, and they decided, okay, who are we going to side with? Let's side with the rebels, and they did. So Obama went in there, he supported them, but in every situation, if you look at this president, he has sided with the Muslim Brotherhood, and he has sided with the radicals. When he speaks to the American public, he speaks about freedom, and he speaks about how we are liberating these countries for freedom, for free elections, for the American way. Well, that's nonsense, because if you look at the realities on the ground, the facts on the ground, you have in Egypt where the Muslim Brotherhood and Sharia law is on the rise, and you have riots in the streets still. Some 8 months after the Egyptian Revolution.
Are you saying that the president is speaking Taqiyya?
Yes, I am saying that. I think that this president, whether it comes from Islamic, I'm not going to get into the issues about whether he is a Muslim or a Christian, and I'm not going to get into the issues of where he was born, whether he was born in Kenya or whether he was born in the United States and Hawaii. I'll leave that to Donald Trump. But what I am going to get into here is where his affinities lie. And I think it's very clear that this president, and to me it's just tragic. It hurts me to even have to say that this president's affinities seem to be with the far left radicals in the United States and with the Islamic ideologues. And both of those forces are seeking to take over America, to turn America into something that it is not and that it never was. I just saw William Ayers on the news speaking to this Occupy Wall Street movement. Well, we are talking about the far left radicals who were, if they weren't involved in the Weather Underground terrorist group, they supported the Weather Underground terrorist group. And the Islamic ideologues who Obama has put into his administration have a much stronger affinity with the Islamic world. And it's understandable, because that is where Obama comes from. He grew up in Indonesia. That there's no debate about. He was registered in the school as a Muslim. That is there is no debate about. And when he claimed to become a Christian, he did so in Jeremiah Wright's anti-American, anti-Israel, anti-Judeo-Christian civilization church. So what does that tell you about President Obama? We are a product of where we come from.
David, Iran right now is characterizing the regional upheavals as a, quote, Islamic awakening rather than the ushering in of a greater democracy. Does Iran see something here that this administration, the U.S., does not?
I think that Iran understands the situation very well. They look at what is going on in the Middle East, and see, what they understand is that there is an internal struggle and there is an external struggle. And the Muslim Brotherhood understands this as well. there is an internal struggle in the Islamic world to see who is going to lead that Islamic tsunami that I wrote about in my book, which is the attempts of the Islamic ideologues to take over Western civilization, to destroy it as a Judeo-Christian civilization. That is the external struggle. The internal struggle in the Islamic world is to see who is going to lead that Islamic tsunami. Will it be the Sunnis, who are mainly the Muslim Brotherhood and Saudi Arabia, or will it be the Shiites, who are Iran and Lebanon? Those are the major Shiite countries in these times. Syria as well, even though it is predominantly Sunni country. The leadership, Assad and the Ba'ath Party, are Alawites, which is a branch of Shiite Islam. So that is the only question as they see it. Who is going to win that Islamic tsunami and the opportunity to lead that Islamic tsunami? And this is what the Islamic world has always been about. They fight with each other. They fight with everyone else. It's not an accident that every single country that supports terrorism is Islamic. It is not an accident that every single terrorist organization is Islamic. I do not know of any organization called Methodist Jihad. There's just no such thing, and it's not an accident. The reality is that the Islamic world supports terrorism.
But what we're seeing, David, is what we're seeing, the overthrowing of dictators. I mean, isn't that a good thing?
It would be a good thing if they were being replaced by Jeffersonians and Lincolnians. This is not the situation. The situation is that they are being replaced by Islamic radicals. So is that good? Is that good for the West? Is it good for Judeo-Christian civilization? I say absolutely not.
What are the implications of all of this, what you call the fruits of the Arab Spring? What are the implications for Israel with all the upheaval and the turnover, the writing of constitutions, new authorities coming in?
Well, it's very negative for Israel. Look, we're not talking about the writing of constitutions. We're talking about constitutions that are developed from Sharia law. We're talking about the implementation of Sharia law, of that repressive Islamic law, in every one of these Middle Eastern countries. This is the direction that it's going in. Even Turkey, that would like to be recognized as, accepted as a real part of NATO, as a democratic, free nation. They play both sides, but they are moving in an Islamic direction, and hence the relationship with Israel and Turkey is going downhill very quickly. The Islamic tsunami in the Middle East is terrible for Israel. That what the world calls the Arab Spring is an Islamic winter for Israel. There is absolutely no question about it. All of the instability and the hatred of Israel that has been aroused by this Arab Spring is very negative for Israel.
And we saw the elections in Tunisia over the weekend, and yet in media reports, new constitution is going to be drafted. But I think what I hear you saying is that new constitution being drafted is going to be a mirror of Sharia. Every
single country of the Arab Spring is moving towards Sharia. And that is just the first step, mind you. It is the development of a base, an Islamic base throughout the Middle East, where those radicals who believe strongly in Sharia law and are prepared to implement it are going to try and take that and export it around the world. They're already doing it.
The president made a statement here the other day that all U.S. soldiers are coming home from Iraq at the end of this year. Do you have any concerns about that?
Well, I think, frankly, I understand that after so many years in Iraq of trying to create a free society, there is an understanding. I mean, I have this understanding that you cannot reform the Islamic world as long as it stays Islamic. And I appreciate President Bush's good intentions. I know he really did believe that you can make the Islamic world democratic, that you can make it free and tolerant, but he was incorrect. It's just not something that can be done. We saw this in the Palestinian Authority, where the Hamas terrorist organization won the free elections that President Bush pushed for. We saw it in Lebanon recently, where the Hezbollah terrorist organization has taken over Lebanon with Iranian support and encouragement, of course, but through free elections. And we're going to see it in Egypt very soon, where the Muslim Brotherhood and their Islamic allies are going to take over in Egypt. And yes, if there are free elections in Libya, we are going to see the same results. So free elections does not mean democracy. Free elections does not mean freedom.
Yeah, I was going to mention that you actually believe those are two separate things.
Yes, I make that distinction all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That free elections does not equal democracy. Democracy means freedom of worship. As Americans understand it, as Israelis understand it, we're talking about freedom of worship, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of expression, and tolerance for those who disagree with you. And that is something that is built into American society. It took many years to develop it, but it is built into American society. And in Israel, you would not believe the debates in the Knesset, in the Israeli parliament, where we're talking about freedom of expression. And in the Islamic countries, there is no such civilization. There is no belief in that. In fact, just to cite an example that cannot be mentioned enough, in Egypt, less than a year ago, there was a survey taken in which they found that 84% of Egyptians believe that a Muslim who changes his religion should be executed. Well, that doesn't sound like tolerance or freedom of worship or freedom of expression to me.
Not at all. Not at all. David, we have invested a lot of money as a nation. We've invested lives, American soldiers who gave their lives fighting for this so-called freedom in Afghanistan and Libya. Is this all in vain?
I believe so. And I'm sorry to say so. I'm well aware of the deficit that the United States is carrying right now that needs to be dealt with, and all that we see going on is just rampant spending on things that are not going to go anywhere. America should be very careful about where it spends its money overseas.
You're listening to Crosstalk here on VCY America. We have a break coming up. I'd like to open our phone lines where you can call in and ask questions of our guest or make a comment about something said here. Our number 800-733-9829, 800-733-9829. We're going to take this quick break. We'll have your calls and questions coming in, but right after the break, we're going to find out whatever happened to that UN Security Council's vote for a Palestinian state that was to occur here in October. We'll be right back.
It only takes a quick look around to see that the world is a mess. There is something very sinister happening behind the scenes in the areas of money, politics, and religion in our country today. What's worse, we are not being fully informed by Wall Street or government officials, and most of the media is only repeating what the politicians and bankers tell them. In the book, A Nation in Crisis, authors Larry Bates and Chuck Bates, news executives with IRN USA News, unravel the confusion and unmask the mystery surrounding the institutions controlling our money, our government, and our religions. They also give their thoughts on how one should respond to the demise of the U.S. dollar, declining morality, the muzzling of faith, and the chaos of the culture. The hard-covered book, A Nation in Crisis, is available for a donation of $20 to VCY America, which can be made by calling 1-800-729-9829. Ask for the book, A Nation in Crisis. Again, the number toll-free, 1-800-729-9829.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America as we're speaking with David Rubin, the former mayor of Shiloh, Israel. David's on a speaking tour right now in the U.S. and heading back to Israel soon, but talking about a number of issues, the fruits of the Arab Spring. And David, we talked with you some weeks back here on Crosstalk, and of course other broadcasts as well, in which we were calling to the attention of the American people this pending vote in the United Nations pertaining to this forced Palestinian state. Whatever happened?
Well, it's still going on. Basically, there was the question of whether the Palestinians were going to get the votes. To have enough votes in the Security Council, they need 9 votes of member countries in the Security Council. And it's very questionable whether they have the votes. So by mutual agreement, it was decided to postpone the vote. And so it's been postponed. And there's a lot of discussion going on behind the scenes, a lot of diplomacy, and the question is, will they actually have the votes when the vote actually happens? They're talking now November 11th for a vote in the Security Council on this issue. The Obama administration has been frantically trying to convince countries to vote against the independent sovereign Palestinian state in the Security Council because they are terrified about having to veto a yes vote in the Security Council.
Just before the calls, there's another issue that just broke forth today as well that I wanted to get your reaction, and this is about the second time now here in the United States. There's a major U.S. hotel has canceled an agreement to host an event on radical Islam's threat to America's freedoms due to threatening messages to management. This is on WorldNet Daily today. It's on other press releases that have come forth today as well. It was called the Preserving Freedom Conference, scheduled November 11th at the top-rated Hutton Hotel in Nashville, Tennessee, to feature Robert Spencer, author and director of Jihad Watch, Pamela Geller, a writer of Stop the Islamization of America, and many other speakers, but the hotel abruptly canceled this after threats coming against the hotel. Your response to this, David?
Well, my book is called The Islamic Tsunami, but I actually speak in my book about 2 Islamic tsunamis. The first Islamic tsunami is the tsunami of terrorism. The terrorism seeks to frighten us, to intimidate us, and I always say that when I was shot and wounded with my 3-year-old son who was shot in the head in Israel, I always say that the terrorists were seeking not just to kill us, if that was their first choice. Their second choice was to intimidate us and frighten us and force us to leave the biblical heartland of Israel. And in the West, it's a similar concept. The Islamic tsunami of terrorism seeks to intimidate everyone, to humiliate everyone, and to frighten everyone in the West so that they will be afraid to speak out about the terror of Islam and this dangerous ideology which they call a religion of Islam. And that's the reason why that particular speaking engagement and so many have been canceled, and that is the reason why people are afraid to speak out against the rampant building of these mega mosques throughout the United States in communities that have hardly any Muslims. And by the way, those mega mosques are all being supported by Saudi Arabia and other Persian Gulf countries.
Pamela Geller said that the hotel caved to Islamic supremacist demands.
Well, folks, this is it. This is the attempts to intimidate people, so they'll be afraid. And people are afraid.
Our telephone number here to Crosstalk, 800-733-9829, 1-800-733-9829. Renee, you're our first caller, and go ahead, you're on the air.
Yes, I'd like to ask, I know the Bible is a huge book, but I wondered how your guest speaker felt about prophecy. Now, Wally Chubat has a different take on end times prophecy in that he goes to the book of Daniel and he says not all of the world is going to be turn against Israel. and which kind of gives me kind of hope. I'm there. I'm hoping the United States won't turn against Israel.
Renee, this is really not the expertise here of our guest today, commenting more about the current events that are taking place in Israel right now and the tsunami that's taking place there. Do you have a question more fine-tuned with that our topic today?
Well, I guess so. As far as Hillary Clinton, I mean, she turned against. It's for this fight in Israel, and I was really disappointed in her. Now she has a Jewish son-in-law and going to have I believe a half Jewish and half Gentile grandchild. I mean, how does she fit in with this? How could she possibly justify what her actions have been? With what is taking place and the Muslim Brotherhood taking over.
David, and coupled with that perhaps is who's on her staff, but is it Huma Aberdeen?
Yeah. Well, she has a Muslim who is one of her chief advisors. I think that it's an interesting comment. First of all, I'll just answer in about 10 seconds about the question of prophecy. Walid Shobat is a Christian, and I'm a Jew. There are slight differences in how we view prophecy, but we also believe that there will be a time when we believe that all the world will come up against Israel. However, there can be exceptions to that rule, and I'm hopeful that the United States will be that exception. So getting to Hillary Clinton, I think that it doesn't matter if she has a Jewish son-in-law. There are many Jews who adhere to a far-left ideology. Hillary Clinton adheres to a far-left ideology. The only time that she was pro-Israel was when she was running for senator of New York State, and she realized that she had better be pro-Israel, otherwise she will not win that election, since there is a large Jewish population in New York State. But I mean, what rules Hillary Clinton is her far-left ideology and nothing else.
Thank you, Renee. Let's go next to Maple, Wisconsin. Al, you're on the air.
Hi. From what I've read about Islam, I think that their concept of peace is when Islam is the only religion left. So when when Arafat said, "I will continue my jihad for peace," I don't think he was lying. I think he was just stating the fact.
Well, his attempt is and his goal always was, and his successor Mahmoud Abbas, his goal is to use the concept of peace in order to have jihad. Mm-hmm. What is Islam considers peace to mean Dar al-Islam. When the Muslims rule the entire world, there will be peace.
Yeah, that was my idea. That's what I thought it came out to.
Yep,
that's
what it's all about.
Thanks, Al. Mm-hmm. Let's go next to Dallas, Texas. Jack, thanks for calling Crosstalk.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I kind of tuned in late to the discussion, but I have to make a couple points with your guest, Mr. Rubin. A little full disclosure. Number one, I'm Jewish. Number two, I worked in our State Department under both Republican and Democratic presidents. For many years, I was stationed all over the world. And at certain points, although I agree with certain things that David says, we need to keep an eye on Saudi Arabia. They are definitely supporters of the spreading of Islamic fundamentalism. Using the word Sharia as kind of a buzzword, of a fear word, it's just not true in most cases. When you look at countries like, you can talk about Egypt, and already the right is saying that, the Muslim Brotherhood is going to take over Egypt, and it's just not going to happen. It may happen on the surface. When you have an army and you have a strong middle class and wealth infrastructure there, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen in Turkey, although the leader there is an idiot, and he's spouting all this anti-Israel rhetoric and all that. Israel has, behind the scenes, is still doing extensive work in fact, in training with the Turkish army.
Jack, Jack, let me interrupt you just for a moment. Hello, Jack.
The Turkish airline is owned by an Israeli.
Jack, I'm going to have you hold one moment, and I'm going to have David respond to what you've said so far. I'll let you comment further on him, but you've said a lot this far. David, what about Sharia? Is it just a buzzword of fear? And what about the Muslim Brotherhood aspect in Egypt? What I see, there are four parties opting right now for the leadership of the country. Two of the four have strong Muslim Brotherhood or Sharia, the Islamic connections.
Well, all you have to do is look at the polls in Egypt. The Muslim Brotherhood and the other parties, which are Islamic, but Islamist by nature, that believe in Sharia law and establish Sharia law as the law of the land, they have majority, a clear majority in Egypt. Every single survey says that. I don't know if the gentleman heard the survey that I quoted earlier. About 84% Egyptians believing that a Muslim who changes his religion should be executed. It's just so clear, and yes, that concept of executing somebody because he wants to change his religion, to change his religious beliefs, that is contrary to what we all believe in the free world. And just as there were many people who during the rise of Nazism preferred to stick their heads in the sand and not pay attention to what was going on, so too this gentleman seems to be doing the same thing. You could not put your head in the sand and be honest and understand what is really going on. It's not an accident that in Saudi Arabia American soldiers have to hide their Bibles. They couldn't hold their Bibles openly and walk in the street because it is illegal in Egypt to have any outward expression of Christianity, of Judaism, of any other religion other than Islam. That is what Sharia law says, and that is what it is, and would and will be in practice in Egypt, in Libya, and yes, eventually in Turkey, if it continues to go in the same direction that it's going.
Go ahead, Jack.
Well, first off, Mr. Rubin, you don't know me, so for you to make the assumption that I'm a Jew sticking my head in the sand is just absolutely disrespectful and incorrect, as I don't know you. Secondly, but by the way, another clarification, I am very Zionist and very pro-Israel, and that'll be another discussion someday. But to get back to what you're saying, 84% of the Egyptians, 84% of what segment of Egyptians? 84% of
the full Egyptian society. This poll was taken in Egypt, throughout Egyptian society in June.
Okay, one at a time here. I guess we got a break, so you both are going to take a break here. You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America, and just hang on the line here, Jack. We'll be back further with you here. I'll give you one more thought here after the break. David Rubin is our guest, and you're listening to Crosstalk on VCY, and I see we just lost connection with you here, Jack. If you want to dial us back, 800-733-9829, 800-733-9829.
For the Worldview Weekend Minute, I'm Brandon House. Our website's worldviewweekend.com. As many of you know, Governor Perry and many pro-family leaders united together in a prayer event in August of 2010. One of the groups that was involved was IHOP and Mike Bickle. IHOP stands for International House of Prayer, and it's out of Kansas City. I tried warning many of the evangelical and pro-family leaders that the group IHOP does not embrace what I believe is biblical Christianity. In fact, on their own website, in the IHOP bookstore, they're promoting and selling a book called Fire Within, St. Teresa of Avila, St. John of the Cross, and the Gospel on Prayer. The book was written by a Catholic priest. St. Teresa of Avila promoted contemplative prayer in the mid-1500s. And her fourth stage of prayer, she was often seen levitating up off the floor. Inside the bookstore, we read where Mike Bickle says, quote, "I want this book to be the manual for IHOP KC," end quote. Perhaps pro-family and evangelical leaders will now realize they were helping, I believe, to promote a man whose ministry embraces mysticism.
And Jack, as you're listening to us in Dallas, please give us a call back here at 800-733-9829. Had a disconnect that took place here through our transcription equipment here. David Rubin, though, with us. And David, he's taken exception he said, I'm a Zionist. I'm not putting my head in the sand. How dare you say something like that? But your further comment here, the break kind of took us up. You were saying what survey? What survey said that? What segment of the population was that from Egypt?
Well, this was a survey that was taken by the Pew organization, PEW. That's a very respected polling group, and anyone who wants to check out the results of that poll and verify it, as it seems like Jack would want to do, can just Google it, and I'm sure they will find it. There were other results of that poll as well that said that a thief should have his hands cut off. 77% said that anyone who steals should have his hands removed. That's Sharia law. And that is what people in Egypt believe in, except for the Christian population, of course, which is being persecuted as we speak.
Richland Center, Wisconsin. Dan, you're on the air.
Good afternoon. Thanks for taking my call. Mm-hmm. David, there's been a change of leadership in the Central Intelligence Agency from Leon Panetta to David Petraeus, who has a lot of experience in the Afghanistan theater. Now, what do you think he will bring to that Central Intelligence Agency as far as the forward thinking as to the steps that need to be taken to protect our interests in the world?
Well, it's a good question. I think that Panetta he's said some good things, and he's certainly. I would think that some of his intelligence information. He certainly had successes in finding Osama bin Laden and some of the targeted killings that we've had in the past year. However, it's more a problem of the administration's policy as a whole. When President Obama came into office, he made it very clear and sent out the message to all of his advisors, everyone in the administration, that no longer were we going to be speaking about Islamic terrorism. That from now on we will be speaking just about the specific terrorism, such as Al-Qaeda terrorism. And it seems that's what it's become. It's almost as if the Taliban is no longer a terrorist group, and it's almost as if Hamas and Fatah and the Hezbollah are no longer terrorist groups. And this is the main problem here. Leon Panetta, his intentions may be very good, and he's done some very good things, but the whole policy, the whole conception of what is the problem that we are facing. Is it Islamic terrorism? Is it an Islamic attempt to take over Judeo-Christian civilization? Or is it just some isolated terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda who are acting alone, and they just have to be addressed individually? So it's a conceptual problem here that we're facing, and only when we come to the understanding that Islamic terrorism and that Islamic attempts to impose Sharia law on the entire world is the problem, only then we'll be able to find a solution. Just as we ignored Nazism and just ignored it for many years during the Roosevelt administration, until they finally woke up and realized that it had to be combated heads on. I believe we are in a similar situation in which we will have to come to that understanding in our times about Islam.
Thank you, Dan. Edward in Erie, Pennsylvania, you're on the air.
Yes.
Edward, I need to have you turn your radio volume off, please.
Okay. All right.
Thank you, Dan. Pennsylvania, you're on the air. Hello, Edward.
Yes. I was listening to a program last night on Trinity, and it tells us that our Congress is sending $2 billion a year in Egypt, and they're out killing Christians. Now, who passes all these laws in Congress when they don't know who's getting the money or who's in charge? And it's something that when I tried to get the White House after the program was over, it was jammed. You couldn't get the people were trying to call in and ask why Congress is spending this money in Egypt. Mm-hmm. So I can't understand. I still got the number down here, and it's 1-202-895-5400.
Thank you, Edward. Any comment, David, here as far as the U.S. support financially of nations like Egypt?
Well, I started to say earlier that the American administration in Washington should be very, very careful about where America's money is going. The support that Israel has gotten from the United States has been a blessing for both Israel and the United States, and the American intelligence community has benefited tremendously from it, and America as a whole has benefited tremendously from that relationship. Countries like Egypt and Libya, I think it is a bottomless pit, and I mean, we just saw from President Karzai of Afghanistan, who just came out with a statement that if the United States goes against Pakistan, that he will be there to defend Pakistan against the United States. If you think about all of the money that went into Afghanistan in trying to create a free society in Afghanistan, it was all wasted. It was all wasted.
David,
here we have an enemy of the United States, and he backtracked a little bit, and afterwards, after the criticism, but he said the statement. He said what he thinks, and then he went ahead and he implemented Taqiyya, deception.
We're out of time here, David. For those who want more information about your book, give us your website.
Okay, they can to find out about the book, they can go to IslamicTsunami.com, and to buy it, they can just go to Amazon.com. Islamic Tsunami, Israel and America in the Age of Obama.
David Rubin, thanks for being with us today.
You're welcome. Thank you, Jim.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the Internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Take Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208, or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.